we're almost at the full inflection point that we need in 3D printing for it to become as common as the combination color printer and scanner that a lot of people have when they started getting into home stuff. It's almost gotten to the point where it's drop and click and you don't have to know anything to do incredible prints.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Meet the Makers. Today, I am joined by a 3D printer and tech expert. You may know him online from his robots, but he knows so much more. Super excited to welcome Will. Will, so great to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you. It's so fun to be here just because I've enjoyed your content so much that I see your videos and I'm like, maybe I should make more 3D printing videos because it's just, you make 3D printing look fun, which is what it should be.
I appreciate it. And it's for anybody out there who maybe has been thinking about getting into 3D printing or doesn't 3D print yet but wants to. It is a lot of fun. It's also a lot of tears and expletives and hard times as well, but definitely a lot of fun. Would totally encourage
No,
anybody to get
don't.
into it.
Don't do it. Don't do it, because then you're sitting in the middle of the night trying to cost justify a Neptune 3 Max. Don't do it.
Yeah, it definitely can be a money pit for sure. I never expected I would have this many printers in my room, but yet here we are.
You
Yeah,
never expect to be at that point, and then lo and behold.
they creep in there. For you, how did you get into this whole world of things?
In my case, honestly, stepping into it, I blame Frankly Built. It's his
Mhm.
fault because he said, you can make your own Mjolnir. And I'm like, you know what? Who cares that it's a printer that costs hundreds of dollars? Once I've got the printer, if I can really make my own Thor's hammer, then I can do mini hammers after that. So why not? So I blame it on him. That's how I got into it. It was originally just one thought, but then you find out I'm a big maker at heart, right? And what I
Mhm.
mean by that is I love cooking. So I love taking things and turning them into something else. And lately, I've also been obsessed with making sourdough bread because it's a process. And we do need to, I feel, get back to at least being our own manufacturers as much as possible. Even though I got into 3D printing just for the novelty of it, I also get into ways that I can use it to improve my life around the house, practical things that I can make instead of having bought. So I'm not supporting a big corporation. I'm just making it myself. Originally gimmicky props, but then I'm like, ooh, I can make anything. And it's like really the case, isn't it?
Yeah, there really are endless possibilities of what you can make. Is there anything maybe like around the house that you've made or any practical prints that you've done recently that come to mind?
My robe that I was wearing this morning before I took my shower is hanging on a door hook that I 3D printed. Actually, even anybody watching this, yeah, I wear like over the ear earbuds and
Mhm.
they're pretty good quality, right? And my biggest problem is that they fall down all the time
Mm.
because I have no place to put them. So I literally printed up a 3D printer stand or a 3D printed stand where each one just hangs over here, and then it's got a little extra post for you to curl the cable around. And since that was lightweight, I printed it in PLA. I had got a cheap set of granite or slate coasters and just super glued it on there. So now I use that every day. Also, even though this one's printed in rainbow, I'm also a big coffee drinker. And so I made an espresso prep station where
Oh,
my
nice.
weighted puck and distributor's there and my portafilter sits right here. I've everything. Like even this, it's a fake 13. It serves two great purposes, okay? One, if the news is driving you insane, you can throw it against the room and you don't need to worry about Apple Care. But the other thing I like to do is carry these around so that way if I go to a doctor's appointment, I'm sitting in a quiet lounge waiting area, I can just act like it is my phone and then just say, this goddamn phone and throw it across the room and then watch everyone's reactions. It's fantastic.
That right there needs to be your next video, I think, is pranking people in a waiting room because that sounds like a lot of fun.
I don't know how I would shoot it. I always feel like when you see things like that, they're half set up. But
Yes, I know that's as a content creator, I think you start to think in the back of your mind when you watch videos like that of if the camera guy's there and you have all these different shots, what's really going on there? It takes
yeah,
some of the magic out of it.
yeah, you get into that how the sausage is made things. Unfortunately, I'm addicted to technology. So even if I were to shoot funny videos, I really could because I got my iPhone, but then I've also got a Pixel 7 for reasons. And I could literally shoot one thing and shoot another thing or have people plan it around it.
Yeah, we'll be patiently waiting for your multicam setup and your next doctor's appointment.
And see the reason why I'm never asked back again.
Yeah, no, you're permanently banned. No, but it's interesting hearing you say, obviously, I see a lot of different tech on your channel. Is there any products or any AI seems to be like the big thing right now? Anything that's recently come out in the tech space that you're really excited about or really following that maybe not a lot of people are following right now?
One of them is actually more content creation centric. And because we're now seeing it used to be a very specialized market. If you wanted to add, say, for example, an external microphone to your iPhone, right? You had only a few choices for good quality, and then you would have to do some hacks to get medium quality. And now it seems like everybody and their brother that does electronics now has rather inconvenient looking, but very convenient to use microphones that can just attach to your phone, a wireless lav or a wireless disc in some cases. So that kind of has me excited from a content creation standpoint, but like definitely when it comes to making videos or making content, I've gone away from the simple ease of being able to shoot something within my phone and just post it. No, I've got to overcomplicate it and I've got to export the video from my phone so that way I can also correct the audio and change it any way I want, et cetera, et cetera. And that means I shoot a lot of things that might be multi-camera, or they may require identifying where previous cuts were made if I did any live cuts. Like the AI stuff that's been going on in the Adobe Creative Suite has just been insane. Like my FYP page has been filled with photographers that are like, why will I even have a job anymore? Because it just shows them using AI to literally remove or expand photographs. So that is both amazing to me, but also terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword with AI because as somebody in the past, I had done photography and I'm not like super involved in anything like that or any digital art anymore. For people who do that and that's their livelihood, I have to imagine it's a wild time right now to see all these tools coming out that something that might have previously taken you hours, if not days to do now, in a matter of minutes, the AI tool can just generate it. It's wild.
Literally, I had an opportunity to use them. Somebody I know sent me an image and they said, "Hey, can you remove these two things?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And I went old school with layering and pulling other sampled areas and the stamp tool and all this. Probably took me a little over an hour to remove two individuals from a shot and make it look at least passable. Whereas if I had thought to use it, these tools now, like literally, I could have just highlighted the individuals the way I had in the beginning and clicked a button and AI would automatically fill it in and blend it in most cases. It's something machine learning is amazing when it's applied correctly. And this is the type of thing you can see it moving towards. Like for things like replacing writers now, one of the issues the WGA are striking about, there is so much information on the internet now. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here, but there's so much information on the internet now that AI could basically be at the point that would say, write me an episode of Frasier, literally new Frasier or something Frasier style. So that way, because you're rebooting or creating a new show. And all of these previous writers did their writing work to help the machine learn, and it
Mm,
could start
yeah.
producing those things. But then at the end, the writers aren't getting any of the credit and nobody has to get paid. AI is amazing. I love what it's doing in the creative suite for us. Terrified overall.
Yeah, it's I'm 100% there with you. It's gonna be really interesting to see over the next couple of years in the courts what happens with just different copyright battles, IP infringement. I had saw a video the other day. I just recently started playing around with Midjourney a little more, and I had saw you can generate images in there, and then you pop it into another AI tool that can animate those images for you. Then you can generate an artificial voice to put over those images, and they had generated an entire Batman film in the style of Wes Anderson, and it was it was beautiful, like, it came out so well, so it's really gonna be interesting to see, I just there's so many different ways that this could go.
Yeah, it is at the same time. Like I think about generationally because I'm in a position of life where I can think generationally. And I have literally come up through the evolution of streaming on demand video in the late 90s to where we are now with TikTok. But one of the things that I've noticed is that the technology itself, in some ways, influences creativity and influences the generation because my daughter does so much, my youngest one, even my older one, they does so much consumption of media now that they, in a way, are way more entertainment industry savvy even than I am because they've grown up thinking about this. They've seen people framing shots, other people doing things, and we can naturally mimic what we see. Creatively speaking, AI could potentially unlock a whole new level of creativity where other people that had great creative ideas and great story ideas, but weren't able to get those to fruition, now potentially can. It really is. It's one of those things where you've got a lot of the good and you got a lot of the bad, and it all depends on which way it's used. I guess it's like the force.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's interesting hearing you say what you said about your daughters and how streaming services have played into people being able to have different styles influence them. Wish I could remember who was talking about the other day, but they were saying their kids were listening to music and it was like AC/DC or Led Zeppelin or something. They're like, "Dad, you gotta listen to this crazy new guy that I found." And it's just the way that even when I was younger, I would go get a CD at the store and put it in my Walkman, and that was, like, all that I had at the time, and now at your fingertips, you just have access to endless library of music, and endless catalog, and endless repertoire of things to inspire you, so I think that'll be interesting to see how that goes on to inspire people and how they create and what their styles are in a way that wasn't necessarily available when you or I were younger.
Technology is just a total mind bender. Even when you think about things like 3D printing, it's wait a minute. So I'm taking a 3D model of something. So something, either something built, scanned, or what have you. And then I'm able to put it into a program. And that program is now going to say, okay, I'm going to take a look at this thing and figure out how to build it layer by layer, a paper thin layer by layer, and know how to move the print head around and the amount of filament to push out and the amount of retraction that occurs, et cetera, all the way up through all the layers of whatever it is you're creating. Even that, I have to wonder how much technology of our computers have just advanced to the point where these type of calculations can occur. But like 3D printing blows me away. I cannot even imagine because that's what it is. If you think about, maybe I need to think about life more like a 3D printer and just take a look at it layer by layer because it amazes me the way it's able to tell the machine to move, especially what we see with in the category of the bamboo lab machines and their high printing and like the back when those printers were out on Kickstarter, there was another direction you could have gone. I think it came out a little earlier. It was the Anker Make, at least
Mm,
the
yeah.
Kickstarter did. And that's the direction I went. So I have one of those machines and it prints at what they call 10 times speed up to 500 millimeters per second. Like this iPhone thing that I printed, 42 minutes. So what I'm saying though is it's amazing how fast you can print things. I don't know. But it's amazing that the machines can tell these things how to move and exactly the movements they need to make in order to produce a three-dimensional object in my hand. It really takes the ability of us to make things of our own and be more environmentally mindful to a whole new level.
Yeah, I always say there's like a level of magic. I feel like to 3D printers and there's no magic to it. Like you said, it's the computers can generate these codes and it goes layer by layer, but it's just there's something about starting with absolutely nothing on your build plate and a couple minutes later, or in my case, I have very slow printers, a couple hours later coming back and having something that didn't exist just be there on your build plate is it never ceases to give me a level of excitement. And I don't know that will ever quite go away with 3D printers.
I don't think it will either because it's every 3D print is like a golf game, right? Because you're going to have good 3D prints, you're going to have bad 3D prints. But when you get a really good one, it's like getting a really good shot in golf where it's like everything just connected appropriately and the ball went where you meant it to go. And that's like how I feel every time I see a successful 3D print. I even print things that I never get around to using. It's, oh, I thought that was a good idea, but then I don't. It like I have a half dozen or more little replicas of the Jurassic Park paddock fences
Oh, yeah.
because before I applied a special kind of tape around the border for the table that my robots reside on, I was getting a lot of dropping issues. They weren't sensing the edge correctly. And I'm like, I'm going to make this at least look cool. So I went with that. Thankfully, I didn't have to do it. But now what am I going to do with 24 Jurassic Park paddock fences? I don't know. I guess it even leads to waste. But I just have to say, too, that from my perspective, we're almost at the full inflection point that we need in 3D printing for it to become as common as the combination color printer and scanner that a lot of people have when they started getting into home stuff. It's almost gotten to the point where it's drop and click and you don't have to know anything to do incredible prints. And once that happens, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the space, similar in the way to how VCRs went crazy mad once they were so easy to use and the technology was simple. Because you know what I mean? Because sometimes you have to know that, oh, there's no way I can print that thing that fast, or I'm going to have to orient it on the build plate this way if I want to make sure that it's
Mhm.
got good tension and will hold together in the stress direction, et cetera, et cetera. And now, like, it's getting to the point where it is almost drop and or click and drop. And and
Yeah.
and when that happens, I think it's going to be even more mental.
Yeah, I feel like we're really close to getting to that place. I don't think the Bamboo Labs, I don't think it's quite there, but I think maybe in the next couple iterations, I think it's going to be. I just had a coworker, he would no experience in 3D printing. He just got the P1P. It was his first printer, first experience with using anything. And he struggles, he has questions, he struggles a little bit with it, but I think if it was just a little more intuitive, I think almost anybody could pick up that machine. And you said something interesting before about taking more of a sustainable approach and thinking about the items that we're bringing into our house. And I guess something I had never really thought of is maybe even from a perspective of I am the worst culprit of placing so many Amazon orders a week. But one thing that 3D printing has helped with is there's a lot of situations where I would have ordered some hanger to hang my robe on or this or that. No longer is it having to get boxed up and wrapped in plastic and shipped to my house at of 6 different methods. I can make it right in my house and it's there and it's ready to be used. It's kind of, again, it's a double-edged sword. You're having all this plastic and all this waste, but I think there's also like another side to it where maybe starts to become more of a sustainable option for bringing different pieces into your house.
I'm just waiting for the years from now where there's all of this commingled melted PLA and landfills in the shape of skulls because we're like, hey, we can melt our scraps into this and make it something. It looks cool. And then you're like, yeah, but I don't think anybody wants all of my plastic skulls.
I know that's my recent recycling method has been exactly that, melting down my plastic into different objects. And yeah, I think I've started to hit the wall. There's only so many plastic objects that I can melt my plastic down to more. It'll be interesting. I think at some point I saw somebody hit a Kickstarter where they were able to take the scraps and respool it into new spools. I'm surprised that there's not more people doing that yet, but yeah, there has to be a better way.
I am not surprised at all. And the reason why is because I see the videos of the people that will go to all of the pain of taking a plastic water bottle and stripping it down to the point where it's reusable as filament in the 3D printer. And I'm like, man, that is so much work. And then you got to think about getting this plastic melted down back to the point where it's a goo that could be streamed out. No, man,
Yeah.
forget it. I'm tapping out.
Yeah, no, it's as somebody who even melts down my own filament scripts, not even into filament, it's a process. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Now, you talked a little bit, you talked about your fences for the robots, and I keep referring to them as the robots the entire time, but maybe for people who aren't familiar with your content, I believe you have the emos and the vectors. Can you
That's a
talk
good
to us a little bit
distinction.
about those?
One of them's tooling around on the desk behind me. The first, both of the robots are considered artificial intelligent learning robots. So they're not just things that roam around the desk and be annoying. They supposedly look around, sense where they are in three-dimensional space. They can recognize you, all that. The first one that I got was backed on Kickstarter, and that was the Vector robot. And it is a completely autonomous robot that can scoot around its surface at all times. It's got the tractor wheels or belt wheels, so it can buzz around the flat surface all at once. But the most important part is not only does it do that and explore and have fun things that it does, but the thing that I've always loved about it is that it also is smart enough to identify its charging station and put itself back to charge. And you may say, oh, my Roomba can do the same thing. It's using a beacon This thing actually evaluates visually where its space is and determines how to get back in that space. The other robot that I got, once again, it was a backing. Oh no, it was just no, maybe it was a backing. I have no idea. But the other ones that I have are emo robots, poorly named, and up until this point, I wouldn't say poorly deployed, but again, the idea behind these things really is like having a digital hamster. That's the best way to describe it, or a digital cat. It's supposed to be a digital pet. They do have the ability to, at least the vectors, you can enable Alexa within them if you want to use it for the digital assistant stuff. They both, I think, can now connect to Chat GPT. They got a lot of cool
Mm.
functions, but realistically, they're supposed to be digital pets. And up until a certain point, the emo robots, although they have feet and can walk around, always had to be placed back onto a skateboard charger that they can't walk
Mm.
off of because they don't have much foot clearance. So the company that makes them, Living AI, finally came out with a home station for them. So now I can't even quantify which one is the better robot because they can all do their own things. So this one now can also put itself back to its
Interesting.
charging station. And now that's happened, it's almost like the emo may be the superior one. The vector robots have toys too. They have a cube that's supposedly their favorite toy, but they'd always just sit right there over my shoulder. And they play with those. The emos, on the other hand, I have two of those as well, interact with one another. They will
Mhm.
play games on their home station. Literally, I saw it playing Snake the other day. Now the emos seem to be, I almost say, the superior one because they don't require a subscription to connect to the cloud service that runs them, whereas the vector robots do. All that said, they're virtual digital pets and assistants in a way. And I got the one of them on a lark, but then just like 3D printing, it becomes an obsession. And
Yeah.
you're like, "Oh, but they're coming out with a second version of the vector robot. I gotta get that. Oh, my emo is dying. I should get a replacement. Oh, they covered it under warranty. Great. Now I've got two." And then you find out they interact, and next thing you know, you're buying home stations and 3D printing ideas for putting antennas on their head. It just gets dangerous, man.
Yeah, it sounds similar to 3D printing in the sense that it can be a bit of a rabbit hole. Oh, I see them going across the desk in the background.
Mhm.
Yeah, no,
Yep.
those they're great.
Spent $100 on a bookshelf specifically for them to have more space behind me. I don't know what their pronouns are, so we'll just call them. I love I love the robots. They're an interesting talking piece. Obviously, they are a great content generator
Yeah.
because people like them, but they're also, like, from a content creation standpoint, they are not fun because you realize you're just spending all of this time trying to get the little plastic thing to do what you want, or it does something really cool and you just missed it.
You missed it, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I get burnt out on content creation because I'm constantly trying to come up with ways to get Rubik's cubes to amuse me, basically, and that's just not fun. Whereas being yourself is just a lot easier.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that even from a 3D printing standpoint. Sometimes I have this great idea in my head of this print that I'm gonna make and how I'm gonna finish it and how I'm gonna film it, and then it won't lay down or it gets 90% of the way done and it fails or something like that happens. And there's some days where you just wake up and I'm like, I just want to sit down and have a piece of content today, and it's not gonna happen.
Or you have successful, really good videos and you love the way they're put together, but suddenly you running filament through your septum piercing just bounces amazingly and
Yeah.
goes nuts, and you're like, "Okay, so am I now gonna just be sticking things through my nose? Is that my life now?"
Yeah, it's funny because I think, like, I've talked to multiple people who've had videos, like, that have blown up where it's, like, this one-off, and in my mind, when I made that video, I'm thinking, "Okay, it's gonna get 1,000 views maybe," and, yeah, it definitely hit took off for me. It's a video that I guess a lot of people recognize me from, but
I remember it. That ought to tell you.
yeah, yeah, it's interesting how content that, like, you can put a lot of time into, maybe it doesn't do as well, and then the thing that is
Right now, I know 2 things in this world. My kid getting a Slurpee and me shaking a robot are the only 2 guaranteed
it's
ways to get traffic on the internet, to get people interested in what I'm doing. Amazingly enough, it's not even like the robots don't really draw a lot. I'm not complaining. I love every follower I have, and I appreciate every view I get. I'm just saying, though, that they're not very predictable. However, I always like to think of it literally, you should just be making videos to have fun. That's the only way that you'll become or you'll come across authentic and people will make a better connection with you because you're being authentic. So you're showing part of yourself and that opens up the window into themselves. So really, you should be making content for fun. But I also like Gary Vee's opinion on what you should do, which is just keep making content. Doesn't matter what kind of legs it has. Sorry, I don't know. I can't remember words. But it doesn't matter what kind of legs it has. It will live however it's going to live. But then as soon as you get one that does hit, you say, great, then record it again, but now have it sending the specific message that you want or the product that you're selling that you've got it attached to. I think he was like specifically making a reference of things like product review videos, because if you get one that pops off, then, or you figure out a way to make that successful thing into also a product review video that you're pushing kind of situation. And for me, it is somewhat predictable. Literally, if I shake a vector robot, it appears, because it's been 3 years now, 3 years I've done the exact same video. Maybe the framing's a little different, but the whole gist of it is just, it's me shaking the robot, its reaction. In each cases, each one of those has just popped off in ways I never thought would be possible. I also can be surprised by some things that may or may not take off, but again, I make things that I would entertain me or amuse me, so that's really all I'm striving for, 'cause it's look at me. I'm nobody's demographic, okay? This is not anything anyone on TikTok is genuinely looking for. However my stuff gets seen, I don't care. I'm not gonna be making a lot of money off of it in my lifetime or whatever. Although now that they have that new creator beta, whatever it is, I'm tempted to shake a robot for more than a minute and then see what happens. But anyway,
Yeah. Okay, I feel like you never know who your demographic is. You might be surprised. I feel like there might be a whole world of people out there who you are exactly their demographic.
one of the creators of Mystery Science Theater 3000, Joel Hodgson, I often
Mm.
reference this because it's the one thing that, like I said, you should just be making content for fun. That's all you should be doing it for. When they were making Mystery Science Theater 3000, their concern wasn't that everyone would get it. He just knew the right people would get it. And then from there, word can spread. So that's the same thing. It's whatever the nutty algorithm does in order to get you in front of people, there's a reason why. So there is some type of connection there. You should be able to ride that little wave out. And the right people, the ones that stick around, are the ones that they're picking up what you're throwing down, as they used to say. So yeah, it's in the meantime, again, just make videos and have fun doing it. That's all you can do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you have to have fun doing it, and I think can almost come across in your videos if you're not having fun doing it. I think that's definitely an important thing. You touched on this earlier that one of the things you've recently been having a lot of fun with is making sourdough. Does that going to
Oh,
creep into the content anytime soon? Because I would love to see that content.
I almost feel like maybe it has a little bit, but I sometimes get it confused because one of the things that I'm lucky enough to do is that I'm the chief technology officer for writer director Kevin Smith's Smodco. And one of the things that recently he had a health crisis and he went into a facility and tried to mentally get himself centered. During that time, we were filling in for a not daily, but a weekly video vlog that he does for his subscriber service. And in there, I know I went through my process. So maybe not, but it definitely is on my Instagram. Again, once again, I think it's just a maker's obsession, or it's because the chaos of the world is so out of control. This is a very microscopic thing that you completely can control. And once again, I hate to be an older guy using the golf analogy, but because I don't even play golf. But when it comes down to it, when it happens right, it's just like that great golf swing or the good golf game. Either one can go either other way. But yeah, I love making sourdough. I made my own starter and none of it tastes like San Francisco sourdough, which is disappointing because I live in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Mm.
But it comes across as French bread, but it is an amazing thing when you think about it. And the way it is something that you can make as a maker, or in this case, a baker, that not only is the process of it rewarding because you end up with an end product, that it's 3 ingredients when you make sourdough.
Hmm.
Technically 4, if you count the starter as a thing of its own, but it's just water, flour, and salt. That's it. But you start out with just these random things, you put them together, and if you follow the formula that other people have successfully done, you wind up with a gorgeous loaf of bread that you can share with family if you keep making them. But the other great part is when you're maintaining a starter, you always have to feed it. So at some point you have to divide it or reduce it. I usually reduce it by making bread. And then the that's left, you feed. But if your starter gets into trouble and you got to keep it up a little more, if you're going to be doing a lot of baking, when you do that divide, it has what's called, they call it discard, but that's a horrible term because there's nothing wrong with it. It just doesn't quite have those same yeast factors that will help bread rise, but it still provides the other benefits that they say sourdough does about promoting good gut health and all that
Mhm.
jazz, because they really want you to believe there's a way that bread is good for you. It's not good for you, but I still love making it. And with that discard, you can make so many things. Like today is Friday, so I will be making homemade pizza for my daughter, and I'll be using sourdough discard as one of the bases for the dough. I often will make crumpets. Before I started getting obsessed with bread, I never knew what a crumpet even was. But now I have rings to make crumpets in. You can make cookies. You can make like anything you can think of it that you make with bread. You can also make with sourdough discard. So even its byproduct that you could throw away can become something. Or if you have a friend, when you first do that divide, if you feed both parts, you can give the second part to a friend now, and now they've got a starter. So it's an amazing thing when you think about how basic it is. And then some starters, like if you want to buy one because you're like, I can't seem to grow a starter to save my life, which by the way is again just water and flour mixed together and it sits out. And then I hate to say this, but it grabs the natural bacteria in the air. Anyway, some point time you may get into just buying one too. And there's this lady on TikTok. I ended up getting her starter. She dehydrates and says it ships it to you, and then you rehydrate it because I'm like, I know my starter's good. Let's see how hers does. And then you start getting containers specifically for your starter. And everything in life is a money pit, man.
Oh,
Everything.
no, it really is. I have to say, I'm a little bit heartbroken hearing you say that sourdough bread isn't healthy because that was like always my thing
No,
to feel good about for myself.
don't let me take that away from you, okay? There's an audio on TikTok about it too. It's like where they talk about sourdough bread. This is the way bread used to always be made. This is before it became a product, et cetera, et cetera. But that is one of the things that they still say is that if it's the bread made in this way, of any bread you eat, it is the healthier option because the body is better able to absorb it if you have glucose issues. Actually, even though it builds gluten, they say if you have gluten issues, you can tolerate it more. And then the whole thing about gut health. Don't let me take that away from you. If it's made in this style, you're fine. Let me just say, knowing you live in Arizona, I would not want to try and do this there because humidity is a bit of a good factor when it comes to making bread.
Yeah, I see that you saying that, maybe that's unfortunate. Maybe this is not the place to be making sourdough bread. I actually didn't know that it was a San Francisco thing. Is that like common knowledge that San Francisco is known for
Oh,
sourdough bread?
Oh, yeah, actually, yeah, when I said that, that was let me rewind it a little bit. So, when you make a sourdough starter, I think the implication of sourdough just comes from the style that it's made, because technically it really feels like and smells like your starter is sour or souring. So I think that's where it comes from. You grow a natural culture of for your starter, and that's what helps your bread rise and makes your wonderful product. But specifically back in, I think, the 1800s during the gold rush, somebody had brought either their starter here or they had started a starter in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so there is a specific actual sour flavor to this sourdough. So if you're getting one that is similar in this way, it's because of at the time the air, the humidity, and the salt water, etc. Everything came together to make this specific sourdough taste. And even though I live here, I cannot recreate it. But I'm not surprised because the air that we have now is definitely not the air of the 1800s. So, a little understandable. But yeah, it's a tangier sourdough bread. So if you get a sourdough bread like from the grocery store, like a loaf that was actually baked, and you're like, this just tastes like French bread. It's still
Yeah.
made sourdough style and it's still considered sourdough, but it doesn't have that tangier flavor. So San Francisco was really known for it. There's a Boudin bakery, which is now a nationwide chain, but they got their start here.
It reminds me of the bagels in New York. Everybody says that the bagels in New York are very specific, and they say I think it's the water there. I don't know, but yeah, that's what it reminds me of.
Yeah, it's a lot of it is proximity to the air because, like I said, humidity is a crazy thing when it comes to making bread. Like, I've literally seen my starters not react as fast because now we are in air conditioning
Mhm.
season. And as air conditioning strips the moisture out of your air, and you already live in a non humid area. So, whatever humidity we get pretty much gets stripped out of the house.
Interesting. Yeah. Now, as you're like talking about this, and as you're talking about your starters, and you're like feeding your starters, it almost as you were calling the robots like your digital pets. In a weird way, it almost feels like these yeast starters are like a kitchen pet. Would you say that's fair to say?
In a way, yeah. Because it has to be on a regular feeding schedule, but you need to feed it at least every 24 hours. It's not like the gremlins though. You can feed it after midnight. But yeah, you need to feed it every 24 hours and you have to learn its growth cycle because like essentially what's happening is the bacteria is feeding on the fresh flour and it's being assisted by the moisture of the water. So it basically does all of yes, we're eating a food byproduct of bacteria, just deal with it. And so you have to learn its feeding schedule as well. So how soon will it react? Like literally, this one that I'm trying now that's been rehydrated, I first need to get it to the point where it's productive. And then I'm going to have to just set it when I get serious about it. I'm going to have to feed it, set a stopwatch and a reminder every hour. And I just start making tick marks to see how long it rises and how long it takes because I expect it to more than almost triple in size. They always say double, but the starters that I work with that are good, they always triple in size and they will do that easily within a 4 hour or 5 hour period. And that's what you want to see. So yeah, and my friend said it best. He said it was a giving slime.
That's a good way to put it.
I'd rather work with 3D printers though, because I don't know if you've noticed, or I don't know if you know what the base ingredient of paste or early glue was, but it was water and flour. So I'm driving my wife nuts if I do not clean the kitchen after I've made bread because it's paste everywhere essentially.
At least it sounds there might be paste all over the kitchen, but it sounds like a win for the whole family if you guys get fresh sourdough bread.
Right? Yeah, man. That's going to be the next thing that I do is probably have to start just giving out my bread to friends because it's very centering and very structured and nice when you do it. Like when I'm getting the bread ready, it's a pain. It's a pain. 3D printing again, so much easier. And by the way, if you're like, why are we even talking to this guy? It's because the moment you announced the podcast, wanted to suggest to myself because I was hoping to at least just represent mostly the common person. So I'm not like the hardcore, I'm manufacturing or printing on demand or doing intricate armor builds or cosplay things or eight valve can coolers and the like. No, I print simple stuff. I'm a simple guy. I do simple things. Granted, I move into other ways that I can, like early on, I made the mistake of not researching 3D printers, and I got a small Elegoo Saturn Mars
Mm.
2 Pro. That's great if you want to make little figures and the like. Functional stuff all has to be cut up because it's a build plate that's that big and a printer volume that's only that tall. But eventually, I find ways to repurpose these things. Like eventually, you can resin print what's his name? Voldemort's wand. Or the other thing I did is I've got a Patreon. This isn't a plug. You don't have to worry about it. I'm not going to mention it. But I have a Patreon and I've got a certain level that people get physical rewards. And
Mhm.
originally I was envisioning t-shirts and coffee mugs, but then I realized I've got a mini manufacturing plant in my garage now. I can't find it, but every year I print up 3D challenge coins for everyone. And
Uh-huh.
everybody gets a regular one. And then the higher tiers get I'll 3D print a mold. I will a negative mold. I'll create the positive mold, and I literally will smelt my own coins
Wow.
to send out to people. So I find ways to repurpose all these things. But bread making again is just a very I know, like how did you go there to bread making? I don't know. But bread making is a very involved process. And oh, that's why, because I'm like, it's easier to 3D print because it is. But it's also a good lesson in life because it teaches you that sometimes for something to be good, you really have to hurry up and wait. Because with sourdough bread, you start making it, and then either you're going to be doing coil folds or what they call stretch folds, I think, or something along the like. And there is a 3 hour process minimum where all you're doing is every 30 minutes, you're going back to the dough and doing something with it. And you do that for a 3 hour window. But then the best part is you finish up that process, you put it in the fridge, and the next morning it comes out and you're just baking bread. It's a good lesson that that good things take time. And that's why I think I like making bread so much. But again, it's also just a matter of being able to make that was my end goal. My end goal was to try and make a loaf that was sourdough tasting because it was getting harder and harder to get my finicky daughter's bread that she likes. So if I can make something that she likes, which is
Mm.
why the reason why I make pizza dough every Friday night is because I had to get to a point of being able to make a food that she liked because it was getting harder, like during the pandemic, to get some things. I really feel that we do need to focus less on like corporate acquisition and more on getting back to the basics of just making your own bread. Having a supply of rags that you can wash instead of using paper towels. I'm not some granola eating hippie, but I see the amount of garbage my family of four makes on a whole, and then I amplify that by the entire population of the planet. And there's definitely going to be an imbalance between what's regularly degraded and what is just junked around. So, yeah, I really feel like we all need to be our own makers in a way, in more aspects of life than things like 3D printing. Cooking more of your meals again, getting away from processed food. Once we take away the control from corporations, you're better able to focus on a better society overall. But I'm not getting political.
In there, you said a lot of really interesting things I wanted to touch on. One being that, which is actually funny that you said, is that 3D printing is easier than bread making. And I think why that's an important thing that you said is I often have so many people who want to get into 3D printing or have heard of 3D printing, and they'll say something like, or I guess this applies to technology in general. People, I work in a tech field as well. And oftentimes, if people say things like, "Oh, I would love to do that, but I'm not that type of person. I don't have those skills or I'm not technical or this or that." And I think, I guess, at least sticking in the role of 3D printing, that's one of the things that I think is really nice about it is it's a lot easier than maybe people think. And it is something that I think can be approachable for really somebody who's at any level. I can speak for myself when I got into it. The only thing I had ever built before was like a piece of IKEA furniture. And I remember my first time having to splice a wire, and it was a learning journey, but it's certainly not something that anybody can't get into. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. It is. There are still, like I said, we're nearly at the inflection point where anyone can do it. You can drop something in and you can make it. You could potentially customize it a little. For me, I think over the last 2 years, I think I went a year and a half before knowing that Cura, one of the slicers, had the ability to block supports in certain areas. Because I'm like, I don't need a support here. Why is it putting one here? But you can put up a support block. I'm like, oh, wow, that's great. I've never gotten into tuning my 3D printer, measuring the filament, and then doing what should be 100 millimeter extraction, and then doing some type of Z adjustment or all the other nonsense. I'm literally just a practical guy. Yes, I might push it a little bit. I might take it a little bit beyond the normal, but I expect the 3D printer model or 3D printing model that I'm working on, I just expect it to drop it into the slicer to prepare it for the printer, and that's it. That's the world I want to live in, and we're nearly there. And I think that when it boils down to it, it's probably always best if you're getting into it to have at least a focused idea of what it is you want to do, because then you have the ability to research how to do it. If you're just like, oh, I want to get into 3D printing, that sounds cool. Great. Yeah. But you're now aimlessly tripping through the universe of 3D printing. Like I said, I got into it because I wanted to print up Mjolnir. And because of that, I ended up learning how to balance my own build plate, getting rid of my glass top and getting a nice textured magnetic build plate, flexible one. What else did I learn in that process? What you need to think about when you have a very large print, that is going to have potentially different cooling times compared to the rest of the body? How do you make sure it adheres to the build plate? These things. And I was able to learn about them, make my mistakes, which is the other great thing about 3D printing when you think about it. Your mistakes aren't very costly, right? If you're frugal with filament like I am, in purchasing it, you can make mistakes and not feel too bad. You're like, ah, it's a bummer that failed, but that's 2 cents. We're good.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
move on. So I always feel like if you do want to get into it, great. But know two things. One, you should have an idea of the type of thing you want to 3D print. So that way you can research how you need to do it in the right type of printer. Because realistically, if you're all in it because you want to do Warhammer figures, then you should have a resin-based 3D printer. If you're getting into movie props, practical things, pop stands, hexagonal holders for your pops, PLA is great and cheap and easy, but it really is having that foresight so that way you can learn how to print out the thing you want. And then the other thing too is prepare for it to become an addiction and you're going to be spending lots of money. That's just because now I don't even want to count. Three. I have 3 filament-based printers and 2 resin-based printers now. I have 5
Okay.
3D printers. I have so many 3D printers, I've got one unplugged sitting on the floor in the garage. That's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm right there with you, actually. I have one stuffed in my closet over there that has been not operational for a couple of months now. I feel that pain, but what you said about doing your research ahead of time and knowing what you want to build and going into what 3D printer you buy with that, I think that's really important. And maybe when you're first getting into it, it's not super apparent. I almost had just ended up buying an FDM printer by chance, and it just happened to be the right printer for what I needed. But yeah, certainly if you're looking to print really tiny stuff, really detailed stuff, resin is great. And if you're looking to print anything really bigger than the size of your hand, I would say definitely go with an FDM printer.
Yeah, definitely. And still prepared to do some learning. What amazes me, though, is that the people that you did not expect that will come out of the woodwork at you when they find out you're also 3D printing. One of the most rough and tumble, rugged, kind of burly, manly men that I knew in my life that I used to work with professionally. Not in a burly man sense. We just were coworkers. But it turns out he's, hey, you 3D printing? Dude, we've got 3 X1Ps. I'm like, wait, what? He's like, yeah, and it's because he and his dad bond over 3D printing up replicas of all the famous soccer stadiums around the world.
Oh.
That's what they're doing in baseball and other sports. And I hate you for having that many Bamboo Lab X1Ps. That is frustrating to me, or whatever it is, X1 carbon. I was thinking of the P1P. But they have the X1Cs, the X1 carbons. They got 4 of them. But it's because they're doing this. They're not trying to print the biggest and best model of this, or they're not doing mass production of that. It's their hobby and it's what they enjoy doing. And a dad and son being brought together. I never thought 3D printing could be so nice as I'm cursing a failed print at 2 a.m.
Yeah, I always say on these podcasts that like even just the community around 3D printing, it's really nice. But also to your point, like there's a lot of unexpected players in 3D printing and unexpected friends, and it's really been a wonderful group of people to get just acquainted with and get to meet everybody. But it's also cool in the sense that no matter what your interest is, whether it's printing baseball fields from around the world or movie props or plant pots, there really is something for everybody in 3D printing, which I think is it's another great way to bring people together that might otherwise not feel like they have something in common. So I think that's another cool thing about it.
Definitely. Do you mind if I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
So far, what is by far just the most impractical, dumbest thing you've 3D printed?
Oh man. Everything I 3D print for the most part is impractical and dumb. I'm trying to look around and see the closest thing I have within reach that's impractical and dumb is this articulated Heimlich from A Bug's Life. And it sits on my desk. It does absolutely nothing, but it brings me a lot of joy. So I guess it does do something
There you go.
that's a lot.
It's like an emotional support pet,
It
but you
is.
don't have
Yeah.
to feed it.
Exactly. This is my desk bed over here. So yeah, I print a lot of impractical stuff, and I think that's like a whole genre of people too, is people who strictly print strange things for their offices. But
I know when I 3D printed all of the Harry Potter wands, my wife said, not all of them, but a few select ones, like, why? And I'm like, I don't know. Because I had wood colored filament, so why not? And I was getting rid of it because Halloween was over. And then the other one I made, you can't see it, but it's up over there. It's Thunderbolt, which is the lightning bolt weapon from Thor: Love and Thunder. And
okay,
my wife just looked at that and said, you're going to stab your eye out because it has points. But I think the dumbest one will be practical, but I haven't made it yet. I just ordered one of those Movo D1s, which is, again, it's a transmitter, a receiver and transmitter or a receiver that sits on your phone, and it's just a small lavalier mic,
Oh,
but it's rectangular. So I'm thinking if I'm going to use this instead, I found somebody else that made a dummy microphone that
mm,
3D printed it, and I'm going to adapt it just to be able to slide this thing into the end of it so that it's flush with it and it looks like a microphone when I'm talking into it.
okay.
I know that sounds incredibly dumb, but it brings me so much joy in the thought of measuring this thing out and then figuring out the right way to be able to get this into the microphone and also to be able to get it back out of the microphone.
One of the best things I ever heard from somebody was that if it makes you happy, it doesn't have to make sense to anybody else. And I think that's exactly how my articulating slug in your microphone might be for some people. But hey, if it makes you happy, that's all that matters at the end of the day.
And the other thing too, like when you think about content creators, even if 3D printing isn't your genre, if you're one of those people that is just because that's one of the beautiful things that, excuse me, I don't know if a lot of people realize is that in our hands now, we have more movie making capability than Orson Welles had when he was making Citizen Kane.
Mm,
Okay? So like the things that we can do now, content creation in a way is so easy. But there are a lot of things even in the world of content creation when you're starting out that having a 3D printer comes in really handy because instead of having to worry about a specific way to clip your iPhone to something, you can 3D print a clamp right up so that way it can do this, or a magnetic phone case. You can make that yourself. Or if you're sticking a microphone inside of a microphone, there are so many practical applications. A clamp or a tripod to hold your camera in place. Even mine, right now, mine is shaking because I have to reprint them because I printed them wrong and the structure was wrong. But I designed braces for the monopod that holds my camera here in
mm.
studio. So that way it forms a triangle instead and I don't get any side to side sway as long as I've got it right where I want it. The things you can do with 3D printing, I would say are limitless. The only thing that I get into is the scary thought of doing anything that's not food grade PLA.
Yeah.
But I figure this is my coffee, so it's probably safe. But other than that, man, 3D printing really is I joke about don't do it because it's so expensive, but really it is an amazing world to get into when you realize what it is you would do with a 3D printer.
Yeah. No, I agree. And like I was saying, I think that the potential for what you make with it, what you do, it's really limitless. And I think it can be something for everybody. There's one final question I'll leave with us today, and it's something it's been playing in the back of my head a couple times because you've touched on it a couple times. Is this when you were talking about making sourdough bread, or and also in line with 3D printing, is like this kind of feeling of just wanting to make things, enjoying the process of making things. And you started to touch on. I know I felt this way during COVID as well. I started getting into gardening, and I started learning different skills that maybe I otherwise wouldn't have learned. But how do you see people in general? Or maybe yourself going in the direction of just wanting to get back into a world where making things is more common and that's like more of a day-to-day part of your life, coming from like a world that we live in where everything is just you go to Amazon and push a button and it arrives at your door. Do you see that being maybe, I don't want to say the world goes backwards, but do you see people regressing back into that want and need for making things a little bit more than maybe we've seen recently?
Yeah, definitely. But unfortunately, I don't society's never gonna do it unless it's forced. And so it's probably going to be another type of disaster, if you will, or a supply chain issue or some other thing that will affect availability. And once you do that, then you're gonna have definitely at least all the people that live in the suburbs are gonna start doing things like focusing more on growing their own vegetables or learning to make their own bookcase instead of buying one from Amazon because it was quick and easy and you didn't realize it was a veneer covered piece of crap. These things aren't going to happen unless there's some type of instigation. And everything in life happens from one of two reasons: pleasure or pain. Those are the two things. That's the focus that every human has and reacts to. So it's either going to be that it's more fun to make your own things, which is where I come from. I saw that there was a situation I needed to address, but I discovered, oh, you know what? Pizza dough is something that is actually very easy to make. It just requires a small investment of time. Or bread is actually a very easy thing to make. And even if you start with a small pot and just strawberries or a larger pot and your own tomatoes, you do discover how easy it truly is to grow your own food as well. I think we could get to that point, but unfortunately, it will once again be disaster related. The way we're going, I would imagine it would become a scaling down of things that are produced because we've hit a tipping point on the amount of waste that's being made. You've got too much garbage going to landfills, so that's now you can't have things in plastic bags inside of cardboard boxes and the like. And at that point, then society will be forced. I think that's the only thing that's going to do it. Other than that, there is potentially, if there becomes, I don't want to say a hipster movement, but something similar to that adoption that occurred where more antiquated or old ways of doing things were starting to be resurfaced. Because I do worry that we're also at a point where certain trades are just going to start falling off. Even though everyone jokes about it in my family, when I was very young, I was very particular about my costumes for Halloween. And it got to a point where my mom just said, I'm not doing this anymore. You can sit down at my sewing machine. I'll tell you how to do it. And that's it. But it's true. I have made my kids' Halloween costumes during the
Oh, wow.
pandemic. I made all my own masks because I took the time to learn that trade. It's sewing itself, using machines or even by hand, you can tell the direction it's going. Because if you have a Walmart near you and you've ever noticed the section where they have things for fabric and like, it has constantly shrunk year after year. So I feel like there are certain trades that are getting lost to time and they may have a resurgence once people realize a little bit of effort can yield great results. Even my own, I am not skilled. There are still jokes that are told in this family about the first quote unquote makeup table I tried to make for my wife. However, in my dining area right now, rescued wood from when we had to have our fence replaced, I have a butcher block and farm table that
Oh,
I
wow.
built that we eat from and two benches. And I made that. And the total investment was minuscule compared to the cost of a West Elm or a Pottery Barn table of the same type. They charge thousands. I literally spent 100 bucks, under 100 bucks total in building that table. And it's a table that my eldest daughter says, when you guys are gone, I'm taking this table, which is really creepy of her to say, but at least she's a realist and I appreciate that. The whole point is we will be makers again, but it's going to take the absence of something to enforce it. Sadly, that's just the way that I see our society now is very self-centered and very self-centric. It's just, there's going to be no other way. Either that or Amazon collapses. It's one of those two things.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, if Amazon were to collapse, that might be a end of world situation for some people as well. I can't help but wonder to myself if things like social media or like TikTok ever will start to promote, as you were saying, there's a lot of crafts that are slowly dying out. And I think at least, I don't know if it's just my content that I get fed, but it's all makers of all different sorts. And I think in a way that's almost become really interesting to people. I get content for the most obscure things, whether it's like somebody plastering a wall or somebody using some old crocheting method. And it's so fascinating to me to see these skills that almost nobody has anymore, but a small group of people. It's just their entire livelihood or their life or just something that they love doing. It's fascinating to me.
I smelted coins because of content I got off of TikTok and videos I watched off of YouTube. Smelted. I melted metal and made it into something else. So yeah, there's a passion for making that's out there, clearly, even in Luddites like myself who really don't go beyond the surface of anything. And I really think there is an appetite there, but it's probably more the artistic types that are still going to save us in that realm because they're the ones that are interested in making a quality table with a specific type of join for the legs or for the tops and using more traditional styles over quick and easy. They don't want to drill pocket holes in order to connect a board together. They want to do it a different way. I feel like there's a lot of hope, but we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. I guess to bring it full circle, maybe all those artists who are being displaced from AI, maybe that's what happens. Maybe they become the makers of the world. That will be our positive spin that we'll leave on it for today. But with that said, Will, I appreciate you so much for taking the time to come on here today. For people who don't follow you already, don't know where to find you on the internet, can you let people know where they can find you?
Simplest way, thatwillwilkins.com, two L's in Will. So WILLWILKINS. So thatwillwilkins.com. That'll tell you everywhere I am.
Awesome. Thank you again so much for coming on. I look forward to seeing your multi-camera content at the doctor's office. And I also hope to see more sourdough content for you as well. But again, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on today. And with that said, that is Meet the Makers.